The Via VHS podcast is changing lives. Here's some testimonials. Bill from Tallahassee, Florida says, I was able to quit my job and get a Ferrari, just like Magnum P.I. Sue from San Diego, California says, wow, it really helped with my crippling depression. Thanks, Via VHS. And Tom from Charlotte, North Carolina says, it cured my genital warts. Wow. Listen to the Via VHS podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play.
Hey everybody, welcome back to BackTrekking, the podcast where we look back at the real-world inspirations behind classic episodes of Star Trek. I'm one of your hosts. I'm called Ka1iban. Your other host is right here.
Hey, I am GooeyFame, your other host.
We're part of the Analog Legends Podcast Network, home to the best entertainment from the pre-digital age, with shows about your favorite geeky topics like classic movies, TV shows, classic video games, and more. Find out more at Analog Legends on Twitter. And welcome to our 4th episode. And I've really been looking forward to this one. What about you?
Yeah, I've been pumped to talk about some non-TNG Trek. So,
yeah. What's your opinion of the original series?
You know, for me, I don't even want to say hit or miss because I pretty much enjoy whatever episode I'm watching. But sometimes it's just not for me, and I think it might just be the era I grew up in or whatever, and like my personal taste, it just feels a little bit slower or something, but I pretty much always like it. I mean, how about you?
Well, I do like it, probably because it's kind of how I got into Trek and got started in the first place. And I was thinking about it, though. I don't know if I like a ton of other 50-year-old shows, and I definitely like shows that are similar to Trek and were made in the same circumstances. Like the original Mission Impossible is really great, and I love Bonanza. Bonanza was on for so long that it really is a 50s or a 60s 70s show. But yeah, Trek just has this special place, and a lot of Trek fans are older, and there's a overarching continuity to Trek that is baked into the DNA of it, which we'll talk about as we discuss our episode today, that I think that even if you start with like Enterprise or something like that, or like even if Discovery is your first and you find yourself really loving the world, you're probably going to reach back at some point and watch a couple original series episodes. I think it'd be unlikely that you would just say, well, I'm just not going to watch that, clearly.
Yeah, that's kind of how it worked for me a little bit, because like they do callbacks all the time, or like I remember especially in like Deep Space Nine, it'd be like, we brought this random character back from the original series, and then it like made me like it even more in retrospect.
Yeah. A character we're going to talk about today as we go on.
Yeah, no doubt, yeah.
Yeah. How are things otherwise with you?
Pretty good. Oh, you know what? I wanted to say while we're in the intro part is I realized what our theme song sounds like to me.
Okay.
It sounds like SimCity 2000 music.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you are familiar or like enjoy that game, but it just makes me feel good and like warm and nostalgic, even though it's not from that.
That's interesting because, let's see, SimCity 2000, I know I played a lot of the original SimCity, and I'm trying to think of if I would even remember the music from 2000, but yeah, okay, I could kind of see that.
It's all kind of grooving and MIDI-ish or like synthy, so I mean that totally as a compliment too. So
yeah,
I guess that's how I'm doing. I'm grooving to our theme song.
Yeah, it sounds great, and we'll just give credit to Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com. He's the one who wrote that. He's got actually a lot of great license-free or Creative Commons licensed music there. So yeah, I think it's a great choice.
Yeah, if you're looking for some podcast themes, that's the place to go.
There you go. Stop in now. I'm doing pretty good as well myself. I'm going to get a new computer. That's what I'm excited about right now.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I managed to come into a little money, and thanks to the generous donations of my patrons at the Just Enough Trope Network, I'm going to upgrade the equipment for the show. So anybody who listens to Just Enough Trope hears me complain about the show computer a lot, and so we're going to finally replace that one. And I've been looking at like laptops. I don't know if this is interesting, but got to fill a little time in the beginning here. I've been looking at laptops, and like the last laptop I bought, the Beast, that I'm replacing was probably like 4 or 5 years ago. And like laptops have totally changed since then.
Right, yeah.
When I bought the one that I did, I wanted one of those things it'll like flip, you know, you can like, it's a computer laptop, but then you can make it a tablet too.
Oh,
but
yeah. Fancy boy.
Right, but I also wanted to have good graphics because I was going to do video editing and stuff. And to put those two in one back then was, I guess, a tough proposition. And so the one I got I thought would work out. It did not work out. So I was looking around thinking, how do I replace that? But there's a ton. There's so many things to choose from today as far as getting a good video editing one or getting that like tablet flip. The problem is it's all about money. Like,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Microsoft has this great like detachable laptop now called the Surface Book, and it's kind of like their Surface tablets, but it's built to be more of a laptop machine. But it's like $2,500. So I don't know if we got enough money for that. Patrons, if you want to support a new Surface Book for the show with plenty of video content, yeah, right. You can head to patreon.com/EISTPOD. But anyway, yeah. But also, I was looking forward to doing this show. And, also, Dark Phoenix is coming out this weekend. The last of the Fox X-Men movies.
Yes. Yeah. Are you excited?
I have not been excited for an X-Men movie for a long time, but I still go see them, you know?
Yeah, I love the X-Men movies, even though there's probably more bad ones than good ones.
Yeah.
And I'm totally not excited about this one, but I'm going to go see it. But my dad and my stepmom are very excited about it.
Really? Okay.
I don't know why. They also really liked... hopefully they're not listening, but they also really liked the second Fantastic Beasts movie that we saw together, and I just thought it was horrible.
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
So I told them I'd go with them Sunday.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go together, and we're on totally different energies. Like they're so pumped, and I'm so like.
Yeah, it seems like Fox has really struggled to capture the magic of a comic book movie in the same way that Marvel has. And I think if you go back and you watch the original X-Men or you watch X2, which I still think is one of the best superhero movies ever made, it's all kind of downhill from there with a few peaks, but mostly valleys. And I don't think that there's any real trick to it. I think it's just having characters with arcs and stakes and good dialogue. And I think whenever they forget those things, then you get something like Apocalypse. The last one was not really all that great.
Yeah. I actually enjoyed First Class an okay amount. I thought it was pretty fun. And I thought, hey, maybe like here we are. We're rebooted and we're going to make some, fun. I mean, there's serious stuff going on, but it's a good time. And then after that, they were like, nah, back to the super intense, like sad, like trying to be sad X-Men. I'm like, we did that, and most of it wasn't good.
I did like Days of Future Past a lot. And as far as like adapting a very difficult storyline to adapt, I think they did a good job. That's the problem with this one. Like, how do you do Dark Phoenix? Like, they've already failed previously. I'm trying to remember. I think people like the 90s cartoon version of it, okay, but
I don't remember it.
The whole thing just feels like a contractually obligated last go around.
Yeah,
none of the actors want to be there anymore, and it's like, let's spend money but not too much, and yeah.
I think I saw The Last Stand. Wasn't that was what it was called? Yeah, right. As a kid, I think I saw that. Also with my dad and stepmom, and they loved it. And I'm like, why do you just want that same movie again?
Okay, well, they're big X-Men fans, I guess.
Yeah, more than
me.
Anyway,
yeah. Well, I guess maybe we'll have an update on that if we see it this weekend on our next show. This is a Star Trek show, though, and before we get to today's BackTrek, we should probably look around at the present and talk for a bit about what's happening in the world of Trek news today. Not a lot of Trek news, actually, right now, but I did want to mention that Entertainment Weekly on its most recent issue, has a special commemorative issue commemorating the Stonewall riots, which were in June of '69, 50 years ago. And so they've got 6 covers featuring different LGBT actors and performers. And one of those performers is Wilson Cruz, the guy that plays Dr. Culber on Star Trek Discovery.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Well, speaking of that, like personal Star Trek news is I've finally started getting into Discovery, so it lines up perfectly.
Yeah, well,
I'm 3 episodes in, and I'm liking it so far. So
okay,
yeah, I don't know that character that well, but I think that's pretty cool.
Well, yeah, you'll have to fill us in on your journey through Discovery. The other people in the on the other covers are Wilson Cruz, Melissa Etheridge, Neil Patrick Harris, Janet Mock, Ruby Rose, and Anderson Cooper for some reason. I guess that he's a high-profile public LGBTQ personality, but the other ones are entertainers. So anyway, I don't know. But yeah, and they have an interesting roundtable discussion inside the issue, and so I'd encourage people to check it out. I actually have a Wilson Cruz story in a way that I'll just blow through real fast.
Sure.
My cousin lives in Los Angeles, and he is friends with a lot of people and a lot of actors and performers out there, and he actually knows Wilson Cruz. And so as soon as he heard that I had a Star Trek show and Wilson Cruz had gotten this role on Discovery, he said, "Hey, tell you what, I'll hook you guys up. You can interview him. It'll be great." And I'm like, "Fantastic." So I get Wilson Cruz's email, and I send him an email and everything, inviting him on the show. And this will be spoilers for you, so I won't say much, but something that really important happens to his character about halfway through, and it's something that like led to him being interviewed on Today and Good Morning America. It was like this kind of big deal. Yeah,
I never even heard about that.
This was about like a week, maybe 10 days before that happened. So suffice it to say, he was out of my reach, and now that he's on the cover of Entertainment Weekly, I'll probably never talk to him.
Oh. Totally misconnection.
I blame my cousin. I blame my cousin, really.
Yeah. Oh, that would have been great, though. But, what can you do?
Yeah, but he's a great performer, and of course he's been working in Hollywood for a long time. He played one of, if not like the first gay character actually played by a gay actor in a major thing on My So-Called Life.
I've never seen that. I don't think I'm very familiar with him, actually, but...
He was also in the musical Rent on Broadway, where he worked with Anthony Rapp, the guy that plays Stamets on Discovery as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at his IMDb, and it's just a blind spot, I guess, for me.
Yeah, but he's been around for a good long while. He's also really ripped. Sometimes I call him Swolber, and he's got a grassroots campaign going, which is like... he's trying to get into the Marvel movies, basically. And he's like, "Hey, Marvel, you guys are looking for, more diversity, LGBT actors. What about this guy?" And then it's him, like leaning on a pickup with no shirt. And
That's awesome.
It's pretty great stuff. So
I love that he's pushing for it. That's great.
Yeah. He's like, "What about this? Consider me."
Well, if you're an actor that's famous enough nowadays, you're like almost guaranteed to get into a Marvel movie.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and so it could be just a tweet away.
Yeah, I'm hoping for him.
Not an email away, though. Not for me. And then one more thing that I wanted to mention is kind of sad. The artist Keith Birdsong has died in the past week. And he was an artist from Oklahoma. He painted over 30 Star Trek novels and posters, and he did a lot of... like, whenever I go to a Trek con, I usually see, like, his paintings on display. He did a lot of great... very realistic paintings of like the captains and ships and things like that. He's also worked on a lot of the collectibles. You see like the Hamilton collection or Franklin Mint, plates, collector plates and things like that. Like he did a lot of stuff like that as well.
Yeah, I've seen some of that art. I love that like style or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, but he will be missed. Let's get into our featured subject for today's show. Star Trek, the original series, debuted 53 years ago in 1966, and it immediately turned the world of TV sci-fi upside down. Audiences were captivated by the series' high-tech visuals, its memorable characters, and the show's vision of a future free from want, prejudice, and fear. And as the franchise continued with Star Trek The Next Generation in 1987, that narrative framework established by Gene Roddenberry's original creation went on to undergird several new series, and the tropes established by Kirk and company would become household terms, like Beam Me Up Scotty, Phasers, Strange New Worlds, Live Long and Prosper, Lizard Men, Flying Dropkicks, and of course, those lovable, troublesome Tribbles. But Tribbles, or creatures like them, weren't solely the invention of Star Trek. Tribbles owe their existence mainly to the work of 20th century sci-fi god Robert Heinlein.
Or do they, I guess?
How familiar are you with the works of Robert Heinlein?
I've never read a book of his. I don't even know if I've ever read a book, so who knows?
So,
I mean, I'm familiar because I've seen Starship Troopers, the movie, which I know is nothing like the book.
Well,
so yeah, I'm not very familiar. I've tried to familiarize myself a little bit since we decided on this episode, but yeah.
Heinlein fans would argue that you still aren't familiar with him if you've seen Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
But I would argue that it might be different than the book, but it is certainly a worthy thing to watch. Starship Troopers, great movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm not very familiar with him either. He's a blind spot for me in my science fiction education. He was, of course, they used to call him the dean of science fiction writers, and a lot of people thought of him as like the premier science fiction author of the 20th century. And along with Arthur C. Clarke, who I do know a little more about, and Isaac Asimov, who I know a lot about, they're considered like the big three of mid to late 20th century, the golden age of sci-fi authors. And he has written like a ton of books and also a ton of short stories and also juvenile novels, like novels for kids, a lot of which were serialized in science fiction magazines like Astounding Science Fiction. He is also one of the first sci-fi authors to leave what they call like the sci-fi or genre ghetto and have his stuff published in places like the Saturday Evening Post. And so he's just sort of like this monolithic figure, not to crib from Arthur C. Clarke, like in the world of sci-fi. And he's like a complicated guy. Like, I don't know what you know about his sort of personal philosophy or even his background.
Yeah, that's mostly what I was getting through, like, when I was doing research about him, like, most of what people talked about him was his political ideas throughout time, his life. Yeah.
And they certainly sort of, I want to say changed, but maybe just sort of altered their form or sort of revealed new facets to them as he sort of got older. He was born in Missouri and he grew up in Kansas City, and he joined the Navy. He went to like the Naval Academy. And so he was in the military for like the first part of his life. And a lot of people think that had a lot to do like with his politics. He met his wife, or his then-to-be wife, was also in the military. She's his third wife. And she actually outranks him, which I thought was funny. Like he only reached, as an engineer in the Navy, he reached like a lieutenant junior grade rank, and his wife was a lieutenant commander.
Oh, okay. That might tie in a little bit to the book, I guess.
Yeah. And it was all pretty much like in the point between the First World War and the Second World War. I don't think he ever saw a wartime service. He was discharged from the Army in 1934 because of complications of tuberculosis. And after that, he tried a couple different things. Like he worked in real estate. He worked in silver mining. I don't know if that in the office or if he had a hat and a pick. But he hadn't really found like his path yet. He'd sort of like dabbled in politics. He also dabbled in activism. He was active in Upton Sinclair's socialist End Poverty in California movement. And Sinclair actually got the Democratic nomination for the governor of California. Heinlein worked on his campaign then too. And he ran himself for the California State Assembly in 1938, but he was not successful there. So after that, it was sort of like, okay, well, I like activism. I have all these skills. It doesn't look like people really want me to be their politician. Like, what do I do? And he had a small pension from the Navy that was sort of supporting him. And he read that Astounding Science Fiction was accepting, they had like this write-in contest, send us your stories. And so his first published story, Lifeline, was printed in the August 1939 issue of Astounding Science Fiction.
Wow. Yeah, that's funny. In that, like, a video you had sent to me, too, he said, like, oh, I started writing because, like, that's the only way I knew I could make money.
Yeah, he was really surprised by how much he actually ended up getting paid to write. He thought, well, I'm just going to keep doing this. I will say, do you have YouTube Red? The answer no one has ever said to that question, yes.
I did the free trial a couple months ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's actually a YouTube Red series based on that story, Lifeline.
Oh, really?
Which I haven't seen.
Okay, I'd be willing to check that out.
What? You let us know if it's any good or not. A lot of his stuff has been actually adapted into movies and whatnot. Although not a ton of his stuff. A surprise. I would think there would be more. There's, of course, Starship Troopers. There was a really great independent movie from a couple of years ago. I really enjoyed it, called Predestination, which was basically an adaptation of his short story, All You Zombies.
Oh, I didn't. You said that was an independent movie?
Yeah, it was like an Australian movie, I think. It had Ethan Hawke in it.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
Yeah. And it's kind of... there's a lot of these themes in his work, themes about like personal determinism and personal freedom. Also, at least for like the 40s, 50s, and 60s, like very open ideas about sexuality and like gender identity and free love. Specifically in the story All You Zombies, the whole thing is based around like a predestination paradox, a grandfather paradox, if you will. And he basically, the character in the story becomes like their own like father, basically.
Of course. Do you know how did the Heinlein fan base like this adaptation compared to Starship Troopers?
Oh, I have no idea. The movie just kind of came and went.
Yeah.
During the 50s, he wrote a lot of juvenile novels, like novels for younger readers. That kind of changed in 1959 when Starship Troopers came out, which itself was apparently like a rebuttal to leftists calling for Eisenhower to stop nuclear testing.
And that's where I guess his work becomes more inherently political, or like more obviously political.
Yeah, and certainly more adult, yeah. Because up till that point, he seems like, the word libertarian is very charged these days, and I'm not saying it was ever not necessarily controversial, but I think he would consider himself a libertarian with an emphasis on the personal liberty. But yeah, it was after the sort of, peace movement, the quote unquote hippies, if you will, were going against or going after nuclear testing that he sort of flipped over and made a novel, Starship Troopers, which again contains this like contradiction, at least what we think of as like a modern liberal or a modern conservative, what you'd expect from them. It contains these elements of both. He's got this book where his main characters aren't white or even American necessarily, but at the same time, a lot of people have criticized it or just pointed out that it's very fascistic, which Paul Verhoeven totally hit the gas on for his movie adaptation in 1997.
Yeah, which I guess that's probably why the fan base is really opposed to it, because they probably wouldn't like it being characterized as like that over the top as he took it. I would guess. I didn't read the book, so
I think if he had actually made it to see the film, he probably would have hated what was done with it.
Yeah, but
because Verhoeven is a guy who grew up basically like as a kid in Nazi Germany, having his village bombed and stuff like that. He was not. People say that it's like a movie that glorifies Nazis, and it's like, you guys look closer. You think that RoboCop glorifies corporate control of police? Like that's the whole.
Right.
It's a satire, yeah. But Heinlein didn't make it that far. He died in 1988. And after that, he had like a string of like blockbuster sci-fi novels that really stretched like the boundaries of what sci-fi had been up to that date. Novels like Stranger in a Strange Land and The Moon is a Harsh Mistress and Time Enough for Love. Novels that explored, again, those ideas of personal freedom and individualism and free love. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress is described as a very sort of libertarian work. It's about like a moon colony, basically, that rebels against Earth control, like they're like fighting for their independence.
I heard is there going to be an adaptation of that or something?
Ooh, That would be good if there.
I could be wrong about that, but I think I just read something about it, and it was maybe a fan saying, "I hope they never adapt this."
What's Paul Verhoeven up to?
Yeah, call him up.
No. And then after that, like his later work was kind of weird. They sort of call it like the world of myth stories, I guess. Books like The Number of the Beast and To Sail Beyond the Sunset, where he really just kind of steps on the gas as far as these kind of themes go. Something that's also interesting about his work is that a lot of he doesn't exactly have a shared universe, but a lot of characters and things kind of pop up and reappear or are referred to in later volumes of his work.
That stuff is considered more controversial too. I mean, Starship Troopers is in some ways too for a lot of people, but this seems like even I think Heinlein fans seem to be like, yeah, and then I don't know, this got kind of weird.
Some other books, yeah. Like you could read you could definitely read Starship Troopers as a guy who served in the military, believed, in personal freedom, but also the importance of strong defense and nuclear power, and definitely thought a nuclear Armageddon was coming. Okay, I can see how that guy could make a thing that doesn't glorify war necessarily, but does say that we need a strong military. Now let's do The Cat That Walked Through Walls, and it's just weird time travel and incest and pedophilia, and okay, cool. You do you.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't. I don't know. It does not help his case with retroactively looking back on his other books. I think personally, but like I said, I haven't read them, so I'm trying not to judge them too hard.
Oh, me either. Yeah, and I would never. It take a lot for me to want to judge somebody like some of the things that I mentioned. Like I understand that it's fiction, so I'm not gonna try to get down on somebody for writing something fictional.
Yeah.
He was a nudist, though. I just found that out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, not in any of the appearances that I saw him, but
no, none of the. Okay,
but yeah,
I'm glad you spared me of those videos.
Yeah, check it out. I'll send you a link. But yeah, I mean, he's just like you could just think of him as an iconoclast, a guy who believes in freedom of choice and personal determination, and I think that's reflected in a lot of his heroes. It's definitely reflected in the heroes of the book that we read, and that book is The Rolling Stones by Robert Heinlein.
Yeah, so this isn't. Well, I mean, we talked about all his heavy hitters. This is not one of his big books, but it was an interesting one to start with his bibliography, I guess.
Yeah, it's right smack dab in the middle of his juveniles. It was published in 1952, and I think that it's well. First of all, I just wanted to say that I was happy to go with a Wikipedia summary, but Gooey's like, "No, we're going to read this. I want to read this book." And so
I'm
did.
So sorry. I didn't mean. I just kind of started reading it out of interest, and then I just kept reading it.
And you were sucked in.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, there's nothing to be sorry about. I felt now I can say that I have read a Heinlein book, which before I don't think I have. I can't wait for the adaptation, though. Let's see how mad that makes people. Yeah, but it's really interesting. Part of it is so it itself, and I don't know how much we want to go into the inspiration of something that inspired a Star Trek episode, but it itself has its roots in the Swiss Family Robinson, just these sort of juvenile family adventure novels where there isn't really a plot. It's kind of we're bouncing from one sort of problem to the next and solving them with our wits and not making too many points as we go. But I think
that was my main takeaway, actually, because I was like, okay, I think the plot is going to kick in soon.
Not quite.
I didn't like that. Maybe it's just because I was expecting that, but yeah. Took me by surprise.
Yeah, I mean, if the audience is wondering what it's about a family, the Stone family, who lives on the moon. It's set at some undeterminate point in the future of the 50s, and so I think they refer to some dates like in the 90s or the 80s. They probably mean the 2090s, but seems like it'd probably be the 2190s if we're more realistic. And yeah, it's just basically they have this life on Luna. The dad is like the former mayor of like Luna City or something like that. He has 2 kids. Well, he's got a lot of kids, but he has 2 twins named Castor and Pollux, who are the sort of Hardy Boys, Bobbsey twins, sort of heroes of this thing. And they decide that they want to become like tramp freighters. They want to buy a ship and gallivant across the solar system. At this point in Earth's future, the solar system is developed, and there's people living on Mars and Venus and so on and so forth. And the father is at first against it, but then gets caught up in the sense of adventure, and they decide to bring the entire family along. And the book follows their journey as they head to Mars and then eventually head out to the asteroid belt.
Yeah, you know what? They could actually probably adapt this today. It has the tone.
It's got a Lost in Space feel to it.
Yeah, and it's one thing that I couldn't get over reading it was the family is so snarky the whole time.
Yep.
And it actually bothered me, but I was like, okay, this feels like almost like how some people don't like Marvel movies because they're like quipping. I was like, yep, this is totally that. So they could totally just straight up adapt that.
I totally agree. And I think that I don't know where that comes from. I do know that it works because look at Marvel movies, but this was very popular in the science fiction of this era. Maybe it comes from like the sort of vaudeville tradition of like clever comedy, and dialogue that of course went through to the Marx Brothers and other comedy teams of the time. But yeah, I just think they confuse. Everybody's got something in the family. They're all the kids getting the grandma, like they're all getting each other. Just burn, 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 burn.
But that's like mostly all they did. Like
it's exhausting.
Almost like, yeah, I was like, do they love each other? Or
yeah.
Even at one point, the dad was like thinking about how glad he was the kids turned out that like the way they are, like obnoxious, and he's
These
like,
kids are assholes, just like me.
Yeah, he was like, at least they aren't like freaking idiots, basically. And I'm like, wow, okay.
So yeah, like there's several crises that they sort of go through. I think that the book, all in all, in addition to providing sort of light adventure, really does lean on those same principles that have been in most of Heinlein's work. Like at every turn, Stone, Roger Stone, I think the guy's name is, the patriarch of the clan, it wants to make a choice for personal freedom. And you get the family chafing against bureaucracy. There's there's fines and fees for lifting off, and then they get to Mars and they want to. The boys have bought these bicycles that they've shipped on the ship, thinking they can. The low gravity of Mars makes a bicycle like a great way to get around if you're like a prospector or something like that. But then they get in trouble because they don't have a permit to sell them, and so the Stone family's pissed off and they just basically fuck off of Mars after that, and then they end up in the asteroid belt where there's this quote unquote gold rush going on, but it's mostly like just basically they see it as, or I think Stone sees it as like, oh, this is kind of great. Like these men are out here, they're living their lives. Nobody can tell them what to do. Get off my porch. It just seems like a very like libertarian loaded shotgun kind of way to make your bones and your fortune.
Right. I thought it was kind of audacious to make a space adventure book for kids, and it's mostly about how boring bureaucracy is.
Yeah, and orbital trajectories. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that too.
There was a lot. That's something else that Heinlein is known for, is like he was really a proponent, maybe one of the first real proponents of hard sci-fi, that is plausible rules for space travel. This isn't like a Lensman's novel where you are just flying on a beam of light across the universe. Much of this book is given towards, all right, now we got to fire the thrusters for this long, and then we'll drift into orbit, and then we adjust our attitude. And what's amazing is that a lot of this, he took his engineering expertise and put this in the book, because this is 52. Like, we're not on the moon, we're not in space. We don't even have, Sputnik is years away. So the fact that the idea, the principles of orbital flight and space flight were not all the way worked out. and the fact that he was using that sort of science in the book, even though it bored you, I thought was kind of fascinating.
Well, I was going to say it did, but I did appreciate it. And there was one section I really liked where he was like describing a ship, but then also like an automobile from like now, like how the mechanics of cars worked, and like kind of talking about them as like a historical object. And I really like that. Like Star Trek does that all the time too.
Yeah.
And it like, it's weird because like then you have like this attachment to the future, but also like to the now, and it grounds it in reality in a way. And for some reason, that part really got to me, where it was like just describing a car. I like really enjoyed that part. I don't know why.
There's an entire family, of course. Mr. Stone's, or the former Mayor Stone's wife, is a doctor, and she's called Dr. Stone. And that's really cool. But also, she cooks. She's expected to cook, or at least her daughter is. Or there's also a Hazel, the grandmother figure, who is set up as like this amazing sort of personality. She's in her 90s, but I guess you live longer on the moon, so she's still pretty spry. And she's thought of as one of the founders, like she's one of the first people to start the Luna colony on the moon. And so she's there too, and she's something of an authority figure. But everybody has to listen to Roger, and that's something that I think that's a point where I think people think that Heinlein's books are both progressive and sort of problematic at the same time, in that he very often has female characters in positions of power who are skilled and equal to men, but then they seem to cleave to these stereotypical roles and attitudes for women at the time.
Yeah, he's probably just really rooted in like the traditional family gender roles.
Yeah, I guess so it's an institution.
Yeah,
that sexism.
I feel like that. Yeah, there are certain things about like, I don't know. I don't want to ascribe that to like all libertarians or whatever. But I feel like sometimes there's like some
@GooeyFame on Twitter.
Yeah, come after
@GooeyFame
me
on Twitter.
but like it also seems like the Roger, right? That's his name. He's like the least qualified person to do anything. even from the kids, like the kids seem smarter than him, so I did think it was funny that he called all the shots basically.
And I guess I just made the connection. His name is Roger Stone.
Yeah, it's topical, right?
as far as crazy coincidences go, there you go. Well, there's one element to this book that we probably should be focusing on, and you would think, based on the cover of the edition that I read, that it would be a huge plot point, but it's not. But that's okay.
yeah. I was like, the triple stuff is coming.
Yeah, just not as much as you'd think. At some point in their adventures, I think on Mars, the boys go to a shop and they find a guy selling something called a flat cat, which is. It's actually not. A lot of things in this book are kind of tantalizingly described. It's okay. You can use your imagination. He doesn't beat the descriptions to death, but you're kind of left to your own devices sometimes. But it's described as something like a flat, furry mass, basically, that can contract itself into a ball if it wants to. We know that it has 3 eyes, but that's all that we know otherwise. And it's basically like a cute little animal. It enjoys body warmth. It is friendly with humans, and it purrs. And everybody just seems to love them. The boys are immediately taken with it, and they want to get it for their younger brother. So they make a deal. They get this flat cat. They take it aboard. Everybody seems to like it. And as they make their, their swing out to the belt, it's going to take them 6 months to get out there. And over the course of the 6 months, this flat cat has babies and reproduces, and those babies reproduce, and then those babies reproduce. And I don't remember the final number, but there's like thousands of flat cats basically on the ship, and they're eating all their food, and they're in trouble.
The trouble is the key word.
That's right. There is a specific trouble here. And their solution is, again, tantalizing, because a lot of, I'm not sure what the really term is, but a lot of Heinlein's stuff is he doesn't stop to explain, so he'll just use terms and you kind of pick up what it means as you go along. But I never really understood what they did with them. I guess they put them in like a part of the hold that wasn't, there were no environmental controls. So it was like a deep freeze basically. So I think they just kind of spaced them, but like inside their own ship. and then later on
Yeah.
they somehow revived them.
Yeah, well, I think they explained that like they can survive. Like are they like tardigrades or something?
Oh,
Like,
there you go.
I think they did explain like, yeah, we're not killing them. We're like putting them on deep freeze.
Yeah, yeah.
I was a little. I don't want to keep being negative. I was just like a little disappointed because I thought, oh, this is gonna be like fun and wacky. And,
Right. What are they gonna do? Yeah.
And instead they're like, yeah, we'll just put them away. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah, it's like Alien, in the movie Aliens is like a sort of like dark version of the Tribbles. It's like, now there's a lot of them and they're multiplying.
Yeah,
They're gonna rip
yeah.
our faces off, but this isn't that. And they fortunately, like the Tribbles, the flat cats eat like most of their food. So by the time they get out to the asteroid belt, they're in trouble. But again, in this book where it's light, we don't want to make anything too taxing. Apparently, like a lot of the miners are like, oh sure, I'll have a flat cat, and so they are able to sell the flat cats to everybody using a bit of ingenuity. Actually, in this world, there aren't like communicators and view screens. They're using radio, and I guess the mayor every week or like every day has his like mayor broadcast, like, what's up, it's the mayor, here's what's going on, here's what the weather is. And so the twins figure out that they can broadcast on that same frequency. So as soon as the mayor's done, they're like, stay tuned for the Flat Cat Potato Hour or whatever. And then they'd like put on a little show and do skits and then sort of like hype up the Flat Cats. So eventually all these prospectors come and take all their Flat Cats. Now, we don't stick around long enough to see if the stones ever return to the belt. It's just choked with flat cats. We don't know if that ever happens, but it seems like an eventuality.
Yeah, I would have read a whole flat cat based novel. Maybe the Tribbles had me ready for it, but
Yeah. The sequel with the flat cat, the family flat cats.
that's Sly and the family flat cat.
So that's where the flat cats come from, but do they? Is this the original form of this story? We don't know, because Heinlein himself has said that this story itself, and the idea at least of flat cats, was inspired by another story called Pigs is Pigs.
Yeah. So, and this is one of those like Armageddon Deep Impact situations, I think. Though I don't know if there was a Pigs is Pigs for this.
Well, Pigs is Pigs was written by Ellis Parker Butler, who is one of those authors that, except for Pigs is Pigs, is sort of lost to time, I think. He was very popular around the turn of the last century, and he written more than 30 books and like over 2,000 stories and essays. So like every time you open up, I don't know, the New Yorker or whatever, there's probably a little thing in there from him. But his most famous story is this story, Pigs is Pigs.
I'd never read anything else by this person, but this was I really enjoyed reading this.
Yeah. Tell us about Pigs is Pigs.
So it's like a short story. So it's, they condense that part of the Flat Cat chapter into a little short story, basically, retroactively. And it's basically it's another kind of little satire on bureaucracy where what is like a rail yard worker or what, he works at like a shipping company for a railroad, and they get a shipment in with guinea pigs, and he has to decide how much to charge the person having them shipped. And the issue is whether or not they should be considered pets or pigs, because they're guinea pigs.
Yeah.
And so it's really about him trying to deal with the higher ups, like, which is a long drawn out bureaucratic process. Meanwhile, the guinea pigs just keep reproducing, much like the flat cats and the Tribbles.
Yeah, right. I guess, if you think of Heinlein as a guy who maybe read that as a young man or maybe as a child, and how the things that we read shape us, I guess I can see the progression. But if you strike that out, it's fascinating that two stories that involve rapidly multiplying animals and like a sense of responsibility for them both are kind of attacks on bureaucracy and sort of mismanagement of government.
Well, because was he open about that being an inspiration?
He did say specifically that that it was at least that part of it, like the flat cats part, did come from an idea that came from Pigs is Pigs.
He must have. I feel like he must have also just been very inspired or whatever, moved by that kind of message too.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it actually.
Yeah.
I thought,
wow.
How did you feel about it?
I liked it too. It's not progressive. It was written in 1905, and so a lot of turn of last century racial humor involved. So that's kind of fun.
That must not have been in what I read.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because the guy that runs the office at the railway, he's talking about how he doesn't care if they're guinea pigs or dago pigs or Irish pigs or paddy pigs or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, let's see how try to get all the slang terms for people's in here.
Oh wow, I don't even remember that.
Did
wow.
we read the same one?
Oh no, maybe I read like a cleaned up version or something.
Yeah.
Well, shoot. Okay, I take it back. I don't like it. Don't
cancel your
me
subscription
over
to
this.
highlights for sure.
Well, I thought overall the humor of it that wasn't that was like dealing with the bureaucracy was funnier and more. And I mean, I don't want to compare the two things, but it got more of a chuckle out of me.
There was a interesting, like, weirdly modern thing in there. I don't know if this is modern or not, but like at one point the rail guy, who we kind of keep cutting back to, he's having to like convert his entire office into like a pen and storage space for all these guinea pigs that keep multiplying, while the company is sending to a scientist in South Africa to ask him whether pigs are pigs or if they're guinea pigs, if they're pets. And he reads one of the letters that says something, to the effect of, "We can't help you." And he's like, "Oh, I'm delighted." Not. And I'm like, whoa. That's so 90s. So 1890s. Yeah. I didn't know that was an expression back then.
Maybe that was an inspiration.
Possibly. I saw, oh man,
Mike Myers.
Yeah,
watch
he
that.
Pigs is Pigs. Yeah, I was watching like an outtake from an old timey film from like the 30s, and somebody said something that was, could be taken the wrong way, and the guy's like said the actress to the bishop or something like that, or that said the showgirl to the soldier. So it's like, oh, that's what she said. Has been around for 100 years.
That's amazing. I will also say about it, I just like how like distilled it all is, like into the couple. It gets the point of both that and somewhat of Trouble with the Tribbles, like across, but in a shorter amount of time. It's nice and punchy, and I don't know. I thought it was a good time.
Did you see the animated version?
I did, yeah. I went with the songs and everything too.
Yeah. When I saw that there was an animated version, I was a little wary, but I checked it out. And yeah, it's sort of a Merry Melodies kind of version of it. And instead of just giving it, like when they start off and everybody's talking in verse, I'm like, okay, where are we going? But then, yeah, it blows up into this entire sort of musical thing. And I think I actually like that version better than the written version. I'd
agree, actually. I would say to anyone who wants to go check it out that it's, go watch that. It's on like YouTube and stuff. It's
it's on YouTube. And
public domain by now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's 80 years old. And the whole thing, like a lot of the music has kind of an Irish sort of lilt or feel to it. So at least they steered into it culturally.
Yeah, no, definitely.
But it's very, very entertaining. So anyway, that is the source of the flat cat, or in this case, the guinea pig. We'll get into the Tribbles in just a little bit. But first, we'll take a break for a word from our sponsors, and then we'll be back with more BackTrekking.
When are we gonna get down to business?
What are you doing?
I don't know. It's Macho Man Randy Savage. I figured it was apt. Why?
Because this is Let's Get Down to Business with Stephanie.
And Kevin. Oh, yeah.
And every week we review
Disney movies. And shorts. Sometimes it's the cream of the crop. Other times it's a package film.
So that idiot is my husband, and every week I make him watch Disney movies with me because I have to put up with this stuff.
And I make her watch wrestling.
If you want to hear two adults
talk about childish things
and
the history and the Wikipedia entries. Oh, yeah.
Just a note, this podcast is not safe for children.
In case you didn't know.
So we hope you listen along to Let's Get Down to Business.
With Stephanie and Kevin. Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're back, and we're here to talk about Tribbles, and more specifically, the trouble with them.
Captain's log, stardate 4523.3. Deep Space Station K7 signals near or total disaster. State the nature of your emergency.
It's a tribble.
This morning I found out that he had babies.
They do indeed have one redeeming characteristic.
What's that?
They do not talk too much.
This is my chicken sandwich and coffee. I want these things off the ship. I don't care if it takes every man we've got. I want them off the ship.
Jim, I think I've got it. All we have to do is stop feeding them. Once we stop feeding them, they stop breeding.
You'd seen The Trouble with Tribbles before this, right?
Yes, yeah, plenty. I've watched that one a lot, actually. It's one of my favorite episodes of the original series.
Yeah, I like it a lot as well. It first aired in December on December 29th of 1967. It was written by David Gerrold. It was his first thing that he had ever had published or basically broadcast. And we'll talk about him a little more in a bit. It was directed by Joseph Pevney, who was a long-standing director for the series. And the star date for the episode is 4523.3. And when Gerald originally submitted the outline for the script, it was called The Fuzzies.
Oh, okay. A little less inventive, maybe.
Well, it's more direct. And it was based, at least in part, on the sort of Australian rabbit crisis. Rabbits had been introduced to Australia in 1859, and they quickly became sort of the dominant species of rodent there. They were infesting everything and became a big problem. Yeah. And so, this idea of like introducing a creature that, seems cute and harmless, but quickly will sort of take over the ecosystem that it's in is at the root of this.
Tale as old as time.
Fluffy tale as old as time. And the script was, approved basically by the production. They liked it a lot, but they wanted to rewrite it. Producer on the show, Gene L. Kuhn, ended up rewriting a lot of the show and the script to the point where Gerald wanted, kind of co-writing credit. I don't feel like he felt like the story was completely his at that point. But he did come up with the essential idea. This was submitted late, I think, in the first season of the show, and so at that point you don't really know who's going to be on. Like, Chekhov doesn't exist at that point. Janice Rand does, and so Chekhov gets swapped for Sulu, in the later production script, and Janice Rand isn't on the show, and so Uhura, gets substituted for her, and changes get made sort of as the script develops. Another change that got made is that his later draft, after he had revised it, was titled "A Fuzzy Thing Happened to Me." ...
That was the draft title?
Yes.
Okay, that's a great name.
Yeah, one of the problems is that H. Beam Piper had a science fiction novel in 1962 called Little Fuzzy, and the research department thought, ooh, that might be a problem, so you need to change the title.
They're running into all kinds of trouble with this episode, I guess.
Yeah, they had a one-person research department run by a guy named Kellum DeForest, and he's the one who pegged that. He's also the one who pegged that the idea behind the Flat Cats might be a little too close to something in a book by Robert Heinlein.
What a thankless job I feel like he has.
You have to, I've read, I read Inside Star Trek, the memoir by Herb Solow, and he describes Kellum Forrest as the kind of guy who is just made to do that. Like you said, it's like it's thankless, but if you're the kind of person who's like, I got to check this, and that doesn't seem right. And yeah, it just seemed like a really hardworking guy who loved doing that sort of thing.
Actually, yeah, I know a couple people like that that's like what gives them the most passion is checking boxes.
Yeah. So apparently at this point, like, the script was late in production. I'm not sure at what point, but too late to really change anything. And they didn't know what to do. Apparently they contacted Robert Heinlein, and he basically said that it was okay, like a gentleman's agreement. You can use that idea, no problem. Just send me, a signed copy of the script, and I'll be happy.
Oh, that's nice.
Or so I reported when I covered this episode on the first season of Enterprising Individuals. Since then, Tor Books has published a multi-volume autobiography of Heinlein in his own words. And in the second volume of that, there is an interview with him about how he wasn't that excited about them using the Tribbles, or at least the idea of the Flat Cats in their story.
Really? What do you say about that?
He said something very specific. He said, quote, "If the matter had simply been dropped after that one episode, I would have chalked it up to experience. But the nice kid," this in this case is Gerrold, I guess, "did not drop it, and Tribbles have been exploited endlessly." And he says, "That's one that did larn me. Today, if Jesus Christ phoned me on some matter of business, I would tell him, see my agent." I think he was frustrated with the fact that, Tribbles became huge. And so they're marketing the merchandise. David Gerrold himself, who he doesn't work out the legal stuff. I think he's totally fine in doing this, personally. But, like, he's going to cons and he's signing scripts and he's signing Tribble figures and stuff like that. So a lot of money went out the door, and Heinlein didn't see any of it.
Well, I mean, he agreed. I don't know. It's not like they were like, okay, now we're gonna go all in on Tribble marketing, and like exploit his creation. It kind of was a organic thing.
Yeah, but that's that's the thing about these. Well, I mean, if you're a libertarian, watch out. But that's the thing about working for companies like this, especially when they develop these legacies. You get people like the early creators of, like, Marvel Works, who create, it's a guy who's a spider. Check that out. And then 75 years down the road, and multiple billions of dollars in merchandising and licensing, and you don't see any of that because you were just paid an hourly wage to create Spider Guy.
Right. Some of that stuff I find really sketchy. Or I watched a video recently about the, like, Robin Williams Aladdin situation.
Right.
That seems a bit more intentionally, devious. Whereas this is like, they made the episode and, it's not like from then on Tribbles were like a main character in the show or anything.
Yeah, that's true. But anybody who creates anything, like, for instance, like Gene Coon created the Klingons in his script, Errand of Mercy, and the Klingons is like, that's like a huge thing of Trek and has been, like, forever.
Yeah.
Including somebody making a language, which he didn't see a red cent for. But that's how it works.
Right, yeah. I don't want to get too involved in the fight with Heinlein, especially because no one cares anymore. But they also, it was really based on something else, and it was kind of more of a coincidence, right? So it's, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's murky at best. So
yeah, they're all kind of stacked on top of each other anyway.
Yeah.
Speaking of Gene Coon, this episode is very funny, and I think a lot of that's down to Gene Coon. Star Trek is based out of the classic sort of tradition of the thinking man's sci-fi. Heinlein himself is thought of as the proponent of social science fiction, that is, science fiction that deals with specific issues, social issues and moral issues. And I would argue that that's just science fiction now. I think all science fiction, or 99% of science fiction, deals with those issues. But if you go back to stories of the 40s and 50s and spacemen, they're just sort of like, short stories with a O. Henry-ish type of twist, at the end, without really looking at, personal freedoms or all the things that that Heinlein and Star Trek itself digs into. But Gene Coon saw all that and also wanted to just have some fun with it. And apparently Gene Roddenberry didn't like that. He didn't want Star Trek to be funny.
Wow.
Yeah, even though this is like one of the most famous episodes of all time. Robert Justman, the producer of the show, didn't like it. Samuel Peoples, another producer and writer for the show. All these guys made Trek what it is, and they all hated the Tribbles episode.
Wow.
Because Trek's not funny.
Well, it really can be a lot of times.
No,
I feel like
absolutely
though. Yeah.
It can. Yeah.
Yeah. sometimes that Roddenberry is a real buzzkill, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, Gene.
I don't know what's going on with that, except for the fact that, to me, Gene just seems like a guy, whereas Heinlein, he was in the military like Roddenberry was. He kind of kicked around for a while, didn't really know what he wanted to do. Then he started writing and immediately was like, I know what I want to do. I want to write this stuff. People like it. He was fortunate that people liked it, but I don't think he would have changed it whether or not they liked it. And I think he just wanted to write. And I think Gene really wanted to be successful. I think Gene had a lot of good ideas, but I think he just wanted to get a hit, and he wanted people to think that he was accomplished. And so that sort of insecurity, I think, probably affected him when he was creating Star Trek, because it was like, this is important. I'm showing the world this future where we escape nuclear Armageddon. And I think Heinlein was just like, oh, Armageddon's coming. Like, I have a bomb shelter.
Well, it's funny because I guess Star Trek also ends up kind of saying like, hey, Armageddon is sort of coming.
In what way? In
that, like, hey, we're going to be in the future and enlightened, but
right.
After, like, nuclear holocaust, basically.
Yeah. Roddenberry's like, okay, I'll grant you Armageddon, but then we will we'll climb out of the ashes, and yeah, we'll be all right.
Yeah. Well, I think he has, like, it seems like maybe he has, like, a specific tone or, like, type of show, type of episodes he wants to do.
Oh, for sure.
And I think that is also very good. But then it's like, sometimes you need other people like they do to like go outside the box a little bit.
Yeah, there are specific episodes that are definitely early on that are definitely like Gene is grinding this axe. We're gonna figure that it's the yangs and the comms, and I don't get it. Yeah,
I think that is why Star Trek has like longevity though, is like because it's broken out of just doing one thing.
Sure. Yeah. Speaking of nuclear Armageddon, we kind of were. You watched the 1976 WorldCon speech by Heinlein on YouTube, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think I texted you something like, "Oh, that was weird."
Oh boy, that was yeah.
Yeah, that's where like I said, I haven't really read much other than Rolling Stones, but when I saw that, and then I know that's a certain point in his life or whatever, but I was like, I don't know how I feel about him.
Well, it's an older man for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
He's not a public speaker. He specifically calls out at one point that he was a stutterer, and he's like, but then his response to that is to go, "Where are my stutterers at? Come on, let's see some hands." He's calling out. He's like looking for stutterers in the crowd.
Yeah.
So not a great idea.
Yeah, a little bit was like, okay, so I understand the speech is like it's inherently weird, but then some of his ideas were just like, okay, let's calm down.
Just telling bad jokes. Although I thought the guy telling time with his head, that was an okay joke, but otherwise it's just this captive audience just listening to this guy fill a half an hour. And he does mention at one point that whatever you think is going to happen, there will definitely be a nuclear war. So get ready for that, everybody. Enjoy your meals. Tip your waitstaff. And then it takes a weird turn because he's talking about how he got some booze at one point.
Yeah, because that's where he was kind of going into these ideas, I guess, that people kind of criticize about like Starship Troopers or whatever, where it's like, like kind of to be a man, you gotta stand up and fight.
To earn citizenship, yeah, you have to serve, yeah.
Yeah, he started detailing the Starship Troopers, and but like, yeah, where it's like, it's not just, it doesn't come across as just, you've got to defend yourself, but where it feels very aggressive in nature, where it's like, you've just got to fight, I
don't know how much we need to get into the specifics of the Trouble with Tribbles. I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody's familiar with it, but should we sort of break it down a little bit?
Maybe we can do like a quick recap of it or something.
Let's see how quick I can make my recap. This won't be 25 words or less, but there's a planet called Sherman's Planet, and there is a space station there. Sherman's Planet's being developed. Actually, the Federation and the Klingons are competing over who gets to develop it. I'm not exactly sure who gets to decide. But anyway, and so Kirk is called to the station to defend a shipment of grain, this new grain called Quadrotriticale, which is the only grain that will grow on Sherman's Planet. And the Klingons show up too because they also want to develop this planet. You know there's going to be trouble when the Klingons are around. And basically, totally unrelated to that, cut to the bar on the station. There's a trader named Cyrano Jones who is selling all kinds of crap, but specifically he is selling tribbles, these fuzzy little cute, shapeless, amorphous fur blobs. Uhura wants one. She takes it aboard the Enterprise. It starts multiplying until it's basically like gummed up the works and taken over the ship. So Kirk has to worry about that. Also, Kirk's got the Federation Undersecretary for Development breathing down his neck about protecting the grain. Everybody gets in a big bar fight, which is a great scene. And then, long story short, we figure out that the Tribbles are all dying because they've eaten the grain. But the grain was poison, and we wouldn't have known that if the Tribbles hadn't acted as a taster for that. And we figure out that the one guy that looks kind of like a early 60s John Lennon is actually behind it all. He is a Klingon made up to look like a human, and we kick those Klingons out of there. We beam the entire mass of Tribbles to their engine room, I guess, and start an international war.
Yeah, right. I was like, what the...
And we laugh, like, okay, we laugh hysterically, and it's all over.
Yeah. So much like, I was kind of knocking it earlier, but much like how I said it was audacious to make a children's space adventure that's mostly about, like, selling bicycles and stuff. Like, you know, you think of Star Trek, you think of, like, some crazy sci-fi thing going on. This was, like, mostly just Kirk being mad about having to do his job.
Well, it's partially that, but it's also Kirk doesn't suffer bureaucrats, and he doesn't suffer blowhards.
Yeah, which is weird. Like that's like the thread through all of these stories we talked about is like the bureaucracy issue.
Yeah,
I can appreciate that. That's interesting. I guess maybe that hurts them in their case that they aren't ripping off Heinlein. That
yeah, probably shoots it dead.
That thematically it's so similar.
Yeah, and I maybe the show, because there are heroes, we follow them every week, we're not meant to scrutinize them, but I don't think the show necessarily lets him off the hook, because he might not be a bureaucrat, but he's an autocrat for certain, and the show does poke fun at that a little bit, like he's, you know, it isn't until there's a Tribble in his chair that he's like, all right, we got to get these things off the ship, come on, they got to get out of here, they're in my coffee, come on. Yeah,
there was some stuff in it that I was like, this seems weird that it's gone on this long.
Yeah, it has to, so that, you know, there's like humor, I guess, and so we've got a show, but...
Yeah, that's why I was like, well, this is funny, though.
He continually tells William Schallert, the guy that plays Niels Barris, you know, the bureaucrat, to stuff it up his ass, basically, and then it gets back to his ship, and he's like, yeah, that's right, I'm in charge.
Yeah, I like when he's upset about his chicken sandwich. That's like my favorite moment, I think, in the whole episode.
Yeah,
I just want my chicken. I felt like
chicken sandwich and coffee. Yeah,
it felt like almost like from another time or something. I was like, this is a weird joke, but okay, I love it. That
joke is weird. Also, like everything that happens in the bar, it feels like these kind of vaudevillian bits. It's like, where are the Tribbles? You want to see the Tribbles? Na 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 na. It's taking it. That bit goes on forever. Or they're having this huge, like, you know, Old West style saloon bar fight, and then Cyrano Jones is like having a drink, and then he's pouring another drink, and then he's dancing around with the drink, and then at the end he pulls a drink out of his gigantic coat with 47 pockets.
I was like, what is going... Yeah, that scene was kind of like... I was like, this is a long fight scene.
Yeah.
But, yeah, pretty good physical comedy going on there.
And a little Velcro in his jacket. That was high tech for the late 60s there.
Yeah, they were thinking ahead.
It'd be good for a trader. That scene is like, I love that scene. It's great. It's funny. The way that we get into it, of course, is hilarious. With Chekhov, you know, being provoked and Scotty being the sensible one, and then they insult the Enterprise, and he's, don't you think you should rephrase that, laddie? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fight scene is funny because, of course, just like this huge brouhaha. And all the chairs, I know a chair anecdote. All the chairs in that scene are specifically picked for that scene, that fight scene. And because they had this like different sort of set and the setup, they didn't want to like pay for all these chairs necessarily. And nowadays, like those chairs, if you look at the episode, you know, they're in any junior high cafeteria. But at the time, they were like kind of cool and kind of trendy, and so they had to like order the chairs, but they weren't going to show up in time. So they ended up going to like every showroom with like sort of modern furniture in the city and like rented the chairs, but they were only rented. So they had to bring them back, and they couldn't get in this giant fight. They couldn't get hurt or scuffed or destroyed at all. So as soon as Scotty hits the guy, you see everybody stand up, and they stand up in that way that like your chair shoots out, from behind you. And then there's that one scene, and then in every shot after that, the floor is bare. There are no chairs anywhere because they immediately just pulled all the chairs out of there and probably put them back on the track.
That.
Yeah.
Wow, there was something freaking me out during that scene that I couldn't quite put my finger on.
Yeah.
That was it.
You can also see very clearly, if you're watching the HD remasters, Paul Baxley is playing one of the other crew members of the Enterprise in the gold shirt. And he was Captain Kirk's stunt double, Shatner's stunt double in the series. They actually have a little joke about that in the Trials and Tribulations, the DS9 revisit of this episode, in that there's when O'Brien and everybody sits down at the table, they're like, "Hey, I see Captain Kirk over there," and it's like, "No, that's not Captain Kirk."
Oh, they were referring to the stunt double.
Yeah.
Okay, for some reason I always thought they were talking about like Scotty or something.
Oh, okay.
I thought the joke was they thought Scotty was Kirk. Okay, that's even better.
Yeah, I've seen them all in like a group picture. So which one is Kirk again? Is it the guy that was missing a finger? That's him.
Yeah, those are good gags in there.
And I think it shows how much they believed in this script. Like, Gene Kuhn is pushing it, of course, but like, I think they really believed in it, in the strength of its story and its fun premise. And Gerrold, of course, went on to continue working with Trek. He actually helped rewrite the later episode I, Mudd, which features the return of Harry Mudd. And he would go on to also help redevelop TNG when it debuted in 86 and 87. And the funny thing is, something else that I read about the episode is that when he submitted the script originally, David Gerrold, he used a different typeface, like a different font size than was accepted at the time. Like, you have to officially give them to us on this like 12-point font. And he used like a 10-point font instead. So he ended up filling more pages. Like a 60-page script was actually like an 80-page script. So when they began to work it up, they had to cut out like a whole bunch of stuff.
Wow. Okay, that might actually make for a more dense episode.
Yeah,
in a good way.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's stuff like I think there's more like sort of goofy bits. There's a part where Cyrano Jones like gets away and the Enterprise has to go chase him down and bring him back.
Oh wow. Yeah, I like that idea though, where it's like you can take it and then, find the best stuff from it.
I wonder if this is the first mention of the word pregnant on a primetime TV show.
Oh, I guess I didn't consider that is a landmark moment.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that they had actually said, Mary was pregnant on Dick Van Dyke or something in 62 or something like that. So maybe pregnant had been said then. But, for a primetime show that's sci-fi and aimed at least partly at kids, I think that definitely stands out. It has to be the first use of the word bisexual on TV.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
And, of course, Bones doesn't mean that the Tribbles are bisexual. He means, I'm assuming, hermaphroditic?
Yeah, I think so.
And that they can reproduce, with themselves.
Yeah. So,
but nobody ever says, wow, this is the first time anybody ever said bisexual. Even with Star Trek, you're seeing bi erasure still.
Yeah.
We got to represent this. Come on.
They should have talked about that definitely more in the episode.
Yeah. Yeah. I like how they give him one. And I think in the original draft of the script, he does dissect it to sort of learn about it. But of course, they're these cute little fuzzy things. We can't let Bones dissect one of these things. But I like how they keep kind of going back to him. Apparently the inner workings of a Tribble are so complicated that he can't figure it out until the very end when he runs in and goes, I've got it. Oh, I see you're buried in Tribbles. I've got it. Well, stop feeding them. But that took like an entire episode.
Yeah, that's great.
If you feed an animal, it can reproduce.
Their physicality is so like unrealistic in a way, but it adds to the comedy, they're like throwing them around, and it's like,
Yeah.
are they hurting them, or
maybe they're like flat cats in that they don't like have any bones or something. I don't really know.
They don't seem to care whether or not they feel the pain, but I'm like, okay, but I mean, good. Like one of the best. I actually, for my money, the most comedic moment is not when all the tribbles fall on Kirk, but like the way they're hitting him as they come out afterwards.
Yeah.
I thought, hey, that's genius. Whoever thought of that.
Apparently, the people involved, the producers were worried that maybe Shatner wasn't going to be able to handle the comedic side of it, which to a modern viewer, he's the negotiator. Like, we know that Shatner can do comedy, but, he did Shakespeare and a couple TV things and then Star Trek. So can he be funny? And I think that he definitely took it as a chance to show his range. I think that he's hilarious in the episode, and he's clearly having a lot of fun and sort of, trying to be as funny as possible. But, he is the star of a TV show. He is William Shatner. He's going to rub people the wrong way sometimes. And so I heard that the people, you need, PAs basically to be behind a wall throwing tribbles in order to make them sort of intermittently fall down. And I heard a rumor that the PAs were like trying to hit him in the head. Like that was their way to sort of get some of their frustrations with the star of the production out. Yeah.
I think that happens a few times.
Yes, it does. They're accurate. And then, of course, I love how that's recontextualized in Trials and Tribulations because we learn that that's Cisco and Dax are like just willy-nilly tossing these tribbles around and they're all flying out and hitting Kirk in the head.
Yeah, so it's, maybe a bit of obvious comedy there, but I think it's just so well done. The way they hit his head, there's something classic about that will never grow old.
I know, and the Foley guy, look,
yeah.
every time they hit his head. Prop Master Wah Chang, or unofficial Prop Master Wah Chang, designed all the tribbles, and they made hundreds of them, and they were basically just bits of fur or carpet basically rolled up into a ball. They had a couple that were kind of mechanized so they could sort of move around on their own. And, after the show was over, a lot of them disappeared from the prop department as souvenirs. Also, like, they would, I guess, just for fun, they would, like, hide them around the set. So apparently for weeks after, people would still be finding tribbles, inside drawers and behind sets and stuff.
Wow. Well, art or life imitating art?
I guess so.
I guess, yeah.
As long as there aren't more of them next week.
Yeah, fair enough. There's a scene where the joke is basically Scotty telling him the joke of how the fight started.
Yeah.
Which is a joke we already experienced. I feel like this happens a lot in American comedy where like they like over-explain the joke to you.
Yeah.
And that was totally doing that, but I think because it was like we're seeing it happen, him telling Kirk about it, and his reactions were funny, that I was like, yeah, I'm loving it.
He wasn't there.
I'm eating this up.
So we have to see his reaction, yeah. And for a show that they apparently cut a lot out of, there are a lot of bits that I would call padding if I didn't know better, because you're absolutely right. What you do is you cut back in and you go, well, I can't believe that happened, Scotty. You're fired. And that's where you start. But instead, they literally just do the bit again. And yet it works just because he's playing off of Shatner in that scene. It's really great.
Yeah, even after he's told him, Shatner goes, so you mean to tell me?
Yeah, right. So like, what you're saying is, yeah.
But I was like, okay, but they're making it work. So shout out to William.
That one of the things that I love about the episode is the fact that we get those character moments. There's a scene between Spock and McCoy. One of those scenes where they go, "Did you figure it out?" "No, I haven't figured it out yet." Where we just get them playing off of each other, but instead of the sort of them bickering, over each shoulder of Kirk, it's just them together, and they're kind of, doing the same thing, but it's more lighthearted. We also get a lot of Chekhov bits in this episode. Chekhov was new, to the show this season, but this is a ways in, so he's been on the show for a while. But we get like his bits about like he thinks everything was made in Russia, and at the very beginning of the episode, like he's kind of getting quizzed by the captain, and he's a captain, and Chekhov is just a lowly ensign, but he's got kind of a tude.
Yeah, his jokes didn't land with me as well.
Oh, really?
I just felt like, I don't know. I felt like, not in a way of like, oh, this doesn't hold up, but where I was like, I don't know. I don't think this is as funny as it maybe used to be or something.
Okay.
Maybe that's just me.
Well, you were probably born at or just after the end of the Cold War. So
exactly,
maybe,
yeah.
No Cold War humor for you.
It gives a lot of stuff from pre-90 a different
You're like, what's
view
a
for me.
Cossack? I got to look that up.
Yeah, Russia jokes are just they're not weird, but they're actually huge again. People love Russia jokes again.
Well, I got a couple Yakov Smirnoff tapes I can send you.
Oh yeah, we can head down to Branson. I think he's still going.
He absolutely is.
Amazing.
I also like the fact that Uhura gets something to do in this episode. She's so good, and I know that like it isn't like now where Troy or Neelix is some main character. Like the side characters were just side characters then, but Uhura just barely ever gets anything to do, and she always has so much personality when she does. So I like the fact that even though she inadvertently kind of starts this thing,
it was a little bit like women be shopping.
Oh,
type.
You think it's a Heinleinian sort of thing where she's an accomplished lieutenant and she can run the radio, but women got to be shopping though.
I didn't think it was that devious, but it was like, okay, come on, she caused it because she got too worked over by the salesman. But no, she's great. I love her, so I'm not even trying to like really poke holes in that.
Did you ever see the Futurama episode, The Problem with Popplers?
Oh yeah, where it's like they're eating them.
Yes.
Yes, yeah. Oh, it's been a while, but yeah, that's good.
It's one of my favorite episodes of Futurama. For the audience, if they don't know, the crew finds this planet where these delicious kind of chicken nuggety things just grow out of the ground. And so they harvest them all, and it starts this craze on Earth for everybody wants to eat popplers. And of course, they figure out that they are the offspring of the weird lizardy alien guys that are on the show a lot. And so we have to sort of deal with that.
Yeah, that was a great show. At least I think I remember it being a great show. It's been a while since I watched it, so
they're trying to come up with
Shrek.
Yeah, they're trying to come up with a name for them, and they're what is it? They're like tasticles. It's like I think we can top that.
Poplar sounds delicious.
It does.
Like I would eat anything called that.
It's a shame that Futurama wasn't big enough, or Fox didn't exploit it enough that we didn't have like Popplers at Long John Silver's or something like that.
And then that would be more Heinlein money.
that he's not going to get.
Sucker.
Well, I think this show is ready to give birth. It's been around long enough. So anything else that you wanted to say about Heinlein, the Trouble with Tribbles, Flat Cats, the Rolling Stones? Space Family Stone is another name for the book.
Oh, okay. I didn't
think
know
the
that.
European version was called Space Family Stone.
Yeah, no, sorry if I was like, I always feel bad when I'm negative about stuff on podcasts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have like this.
You kicked the shit out of Resident Evil the other day.
Yeah, no. I felt bad. I felt like dirty. So yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. I like the cover of that book that I saw, the Rolling Stones.
Yeah,
cool
yeah.
Art. Yeah. So shout out to the artist, whoever that was.
Nameless artist.
Yeah, no. How about you?
Yeah, it's fascinating, I think, to find out where things come from. And of course, since they kind of came from something, they're going to have similar threads. But the fact that we start with a story, a short story, not even like maybe 2 pages of multiplying animals battling with bureaucracy, and then we end up with almost 70 years later Star Trek, and it's the exact same thing. Like, that just blows me away.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could still there's still more in the tank with that concept, I think, too.
Oh, you want to do Tribbles again?
Tribbles again, or Pigs is Pigs 2?
More Tribbles, more troubles.
Yeah, 2 Tribbles, 2 troublesome.
Too troublesome. The Tribble with the curve.
Okay.
Or, Tribble finds you. Oh, you could do like a Space Jam type thing where the Tribbles, you always have to put sports into it in the fourth or fifth one, so you can have double tribbling.
Oh, no.
Okay, yeah, that's probably time to stop.
Yeah.
I said that I was going to, and we didn't even talk about William Campbell, who plays Koloth, who is awesome. I love William Campbell.
Yes. Oh, yeah, and they bring him back.
Yeah, he played Trelane before this.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, he's great in this.
And, of course, yeah, he shows up again in DS9.
Yeah, I love that. I get pumped when I watch that episode.
Blood Oath.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great episode.
It's so great because we're going to talk about Blood Oath now, because it's just like this whole show is about like, yes, let's have respect the Bajorans and their religion. And it's like, you guys just want to like stab a bunch of people with batless for a while?
Yes.
You just want to get like the three. We finally were able to schedule the three big Klingon actors from like the original series on the same show. So we're just going to like stab a bunch of people to death.
I think I've mentioned this on any Star Trek podcast I've been on, but I've sometimes turned off too when it's like they got to end the episode like, oh well, you got your saddle back, you just killed some people.
Yeah,
I love that episode because it just ends with them all looking at them like, the hell did you just do? Like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
that's great. That's so good.
Yeah, and it's not even Worf who's usually getting yelled at like by Picard because he's like, what? We were Klingons, we kill each other. And he's like, you don't do that now. You're a Starfleet guy. It's like, Willowy Dax is out there just like, sweeping the leg.
Oh, yeah. So good. We could do a whole thing
Well,
on
if only
that,
it was based on something we could talk about. But unfortunately, it's original.
Well, it's got the guys. Maybe is that reaching, though?
So, based on Star Trek, the original series, season 1, 2, and 3?
Yep, exactly.
So meet you back here next week. We'll have watched all 73 episodes of Star Trek the original series.
Exactly.
Or 72, don't at me. Should we talk about what's coming up on next week's show?
So for next week, we're going to watch the original Tim Burton Batman movie, which has a line in it that inspired the title of a Deep Space Nine episode.
Is this show a sham? That's what I need to know.
This show?
Yes, it doesn't seem like there is much of a connection there, but let me paint a picture for you. 1989, Michael Keaton, a young Michael Keaton is Batman. And fast forward to the mid-90s, a man called Hawk is Cisco, and he is plotting and skullduggery and dark deeds to win the Dominion War. If these two didn't have a connection, I'd try to find one. But the connection happens to be in the pale moonlight.
Your tone of voice convinced me that these episodes or these things are identical. So
it's a powerful weapon, and I use it wisely. But we'll be using it again, of course, next week. Thanks for joining us. Come back and join us next week for those. If you like the show, tell a friend. Follow us at BackTrekking on Twitter. And also tell us what you think that we should look at in future episodes. What is it? We've got Boom. You've got the Beastie Boys. Boom, Measure of a Man. Boom, Trouble with Tribbles. We're just hitting them left, right, and center. So, yeah, why not? Let's talk about In the Pale Moonlight. But we're always looking for suggestions as to what you think we should talk about. So let us know on social media. We're at BackTrekking on Twitter. And, of course, like and subscribe us wherever you find us. I did create a Facebook page. If you are one of the last people on Earth that's still on Facebook, you can find us at facebook.com/BackTrekking. So see us there, too. Gooey, where can people find you online?
Find me on Twitter at GooeyFame and check out all the podcasts I list there because I had a bunch come out in the last week.
All the various and sundry podcasts. And I'm at Ka1iban, Ka1iban on Twitter. And you can find me at, let's say, at Craft Disservice on Twitter, which is the Twitter for my bad movie show, Craft Disservices, which Gooey has been on, but the episode has not come out yet, but will soon.
Yes.
And that's it for us this week. We'll see you soon, and keep on trekking.